Good evening and welcome to The Square. I'd like to start by apologizing for starting late. We've been experiencing technical difficulties at RTV, but we are now good to go, so to speak. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to tonight's edition of The Square. Tonight is the second part series of a conversation we've had before and focusing on the quality of education in Rwanda, in the education sector. And previously we looked at content in terms of quality of content, English is the medium of instruction, as well as structural changes at the Rwanda Educational Board. This is on the last show we had. This evening we are going to look at a couple of things that affect public schools, primary and secondary public schools in the country. And just very briefly, these are to do with the phase out of the double shift program. We're also going to focus on the addition of over 3,000 teachers countrywide, as well as look just briefly at issues at the start of this academic year to do with student school placement. My name is Dana Mpisi. I'm part of The Square. I am happy to be joined here by our guest for this evening. He's a regular at The Square. This is the Director General of the Rwanda Education Board, Dr. Irene Ndayambaje. Thank you very much.
Thank you too for the invitation.
Thank you to have you back again with us. I'm also joined by my lovely resident panelists. On my right is Charles Haber. Good to have you.
How are you?
Good.
Good, yeah.
I'm also joined by Ephraim and Berna Namata, the resident panelists of The Square.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Great to have you. So because we're short on time, we'll go straight into the conversation. Usually we have a weekly roundup, midweek roundup, but we're just going to go quickly into the conversation. So thank you very much, Dr. Ndayambaje, for joining us once again. And my first question to you on behalf of the Square is to do with reforms in education. So the Ministry of Education has made some significant changes at the start of this academic year. This is the addition of over 3,302 teachers, to be exact, across the country, as well as this phase-out of the double shift program for students. For those who may not know, the double shift is when students study a particular hours, a group of students studies a particular hours of the day, and then another group of students study another a couple of hours of the day, because I think the reason for this was also a shortage of teachers, amongst other things. So if you can just tell us the rationale for these changes and the expected impact you have or you envision on improving public schooling in primary and secondary schools across the country.
Just to also just say, before the doctor goes dives into your question or answers your question, he was also in front of Senate today.
Yes.
So it would also be interesting if he could also, as he talks about the changes, he highlights
how he was fried.
Yes. Thank you so much. Maybe starting with the morning session that we had at the Senate this morning.
Yes.
Actually, we had to appear before the Senate in order actually to get technical advice on a number of Auditor General recommendation or opinions, as were also discussed in the PAC, that is the Parliament. So this morning, actually, the Senate also wanted to know specifically about what REB is envisioning in order to make sure that it has clean reports in the near future. So as much as you know, Rwanda Education Board is among the 13 government agencies that receive big chunk of the government budget. So value for money is very important, but also accountability in whatever we do or even how we do things. So it was also important that we get feedback from senators. It was a constructive and insightful session, whereby we also managed to express some of the challenges that are affecting our sector, but in particular Rwanda Education Board. So that was it. Yeah.
There was no frying.
I would say that it was not so easy, but what is encouraging and motivating is that also senators do understand the magnitude of the mission of Rwanda Education Board, and they advised us on a technical level, but also they took note of what we suggested that should be improved even at a policy level, so that Rwanda Education Board as the implementation agency can better fulfill its mandate. You know, most of the things do not come from REB, from the top, now coming to the implementation. So what should now be better channeled, how at policy level things should work clearly or better, so that it also becomes easier to Rwanda Education Board when it comes phase 2 implementation. So that was it.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
So if back to my earlier question on the rationale for these changes, the phase out of the double shift program, as well as the addition of over 3,000 teachers.
Thank you. I would say that the two are very much connected,
Yes.
because when you consider the number of hours that we are covering on an annual basis, we are actually using the 708 hours per year, and yet UNESCO is recommending that in countries like ours, we should be covering 1,200 hours minimum per year. So that means that we need actually to phase out the double shift. As you explained earlier, the double shift means we have a group studying in the morning, another group comes in the afternoon. So the implication is that...
I didn't get that, Daktari. Does that mean UNESCO recommends that a student should study 1,200 hours a year? Or it means a teacher should teach 1,200 hours a year?
Which one
Yeah,
is
that-
it?
Which of the
That's
two?
the teachers.
That is what is recommended actually for the learners.
Okay.
So, but in as far as I know, and also recommended in the competence-based curriculum, not all the time that the teacher should be in the presence of or in front of the learners for them to learn. So, however, you would see that our learners have only opportunity for 780 hours. So, meaning that when you go in the afternoon, in the morning you was not in the school, in the reality of Rwanda school or Rwanda community is like when you are not in school, you are not really studying. Children are out there on the hills, what and what. So it's not like in developed countries where the community can find a framework whereby even in the home you can learn. So, but the community of ours is like you learn only when you are in school. That is the reality in a primary school. So the recommendation of UNESCO is telling us that we should actually be achieving a minimum of 1,200. So there is no how we can achieve that if we don't phase out the double shift. Actually, children should have the chance to study morning and afternoon, especially for upper primary education. So that's the reason why starting back the year 2018, the double shift was phased out in P6, that is primary 6. Then this year we intended to phase it out, especially in P5. So as we phase out the double shift, we increase, of course, the number of hours, meaning also we need also more teachers than we used to have before. Because more hours means also the huge teaching load. So actually that is the rationale behind, and all of these are connected to the quality of education we are discussing now.
So you mentioned a need for more teachers. What's being done to ensure that? I know we only have, 16 training teacher colleges? And I know I was looking at the map and I see that there's none in Kigali province. So how do we anticipate, because I also know you have also vetted teachers. You've said unqualified professionals cannot be allowed to teach. So what's being done in that aspect, considering there's this change?
Thank you for the question. What is being done now is first of all, we have two scenarios. The first one is what we call in-service training. So we have teachers who are now in the teaching profession. Those ones need to be actually empowered as they serve. But also we have another part which I have already touched, which is the pre-service. So under pre-service, you have teacher training colleges. There are 16 of them, just like we have highlighted. Even if you don't have none in Kigali, that doesn't really mean that we don't have, because the way TTCs are distributed, or even trainees from TTCs don't only serve in the district where TTCs are located. No? Because even when it comes time for employment, it is competitive based. So no one actually competes or applies for a job in the district where he was born or where he was educated. So it remains still open. That means that we don't really find it a challenge for Kigali not having a TTC. In as far as I know, there are very few kilometers from here to Nyamata. There is a TTC. Another TTC is here.
I agree with you. It's
So
not. We don't need a TTC in Kigali.
Yeah. Having it is also...
It's a waste of real estate.
Not a kind of waste. It could be another value, but not having it today is not really a challenge for teacher training.
Yes, yes.
And I just want to touch on something. I know it was mentioned that by 2019... this is a comment, I don't know when this comment was made, I think it was last year, you expected that no teachers who are unqualified would be actually hired by this year. This was a statement that was made by officials under the umbrella of the Ministry of Education. How valid and how realistic is that statement?
Thank you. I would start by saying that teaching is a profession that it trains other professions. So that implies that we need really competent, highly qualified, committed people in this sector. And that has to start from the word go with having people well-grounded in the teaching profession. So having said that, I would say that those who did not do education are not really qualified to come in the teaching profession. So even those who are in the teaching profession, having not done education, they were invited to do the programs that qualify them to become teachers. So the reason being is that we can really not continue actually having teachers who are so-called trying to know how to teach. No, it is better that you remain in the teaching profession, having been trained as a teacher, though we recognize that even after class, after graduation, you still need to be trained. However, that basic training is very important in the teaching profession. Just like also we talk of the same in medicine and other professions, that is why also for the education sector, we encourage only those who are qualified as teachers to join the profession. Those who are already in, we say, well, we shall continue training you, but you go for academically certified program in education.
And when they go for it, are they sponsored? Do they have to pay on their own? And again, I come back to the question, is it practical is that this will be achieved by the end of this academic year?
Thank you so much. Going to school also, these days, I would say that people are not really sponsored to go for such programs because it happened with the program that used to be called the distance training program, which is started back in the year 2000. Many people joined the program, others said, you know, let us just relax because there was no policy compelling them to do the program. But we have the teacher status that came out back the year 2017, now things became serious. You know, those who were asleep, now there's the time that they woke up. So I would say that this time we are not sponsoring them, but those who want to remain in the teaching profession, they would rather choose to remain or go for those professions they were trained for. So if we was trained to become an accountant, why don't you go for that profession? But if you want to remain in teaching profession, the only choice is to do that professional training. And achieving that is possible because so far we have about 99% of qualified teachers, so the 1% is really minimum. And I think that we even have many who have done education who are looking for teaching profession. So that is already an achievement, and we don't really think that we shall not have the manpower to fill the 1%. Even if the 1% which is in should really take advantage to train themselves so that they remain with us. I remain the teaching profession.
I just want to follow up on two things. One, if we look at what has been happening recently with the schools opening, first of all, when the new school term opening was announced, most parents appeared to have been caught off guard by the dates set. From that, and then we had the results come in, and then we had the issues around allocation. As we speak, we still have parents who are still struggling, you know, where do I put my child? Because some schools were, some children were sent to some schools don't have the capacity. So my first question is around education policy. Like, it's one sector where we have changes, and it's difficult to keep up with all these changes. From the implementer point of view, what is your view of our policy? What's our policy? Because as far as I can remember, we've had so many changes that it's difficult to know who is implementing what. What are we doing?
When you say changes, you mean changes in the education sector?
Yes.
Thank you. Maybe what is important to mention is that all these changes are positive. They want to fix the loopholes in the education sector. For instance, back to the question you was asking, I would really say that it is the first time in the history of Rwanda Education Board and the Ministry of Education to have actually released the result in the same academic year when the exams were conducted. So it means if we conducted the national examination in the year 2018, the results were out in the year 2010. That is the first achievement which could not be achieved in so many years. So,
what do you attribute that to, maybe?
I would attribute that to the hard work of the Ministry of Education and Rwanda Education Board in particular, but also it would be attributed to the desire to answer to the parents' concern. You know, when a student sits for exams, they wait for long for this exam, for the result to be out. Such a kind of skepticism also should be fixed. Again, apart from having released the national examination in time, we also managed actually to make sure that the senior 1 and the senior 4 students start the academic year together with continuing programs. I would say senior 2, senior 3, senior 4, and senior 5. You remember in the past, these used to start like 2 or 3 weeks later. So that is also another achievement. Back to the concern about some parents who are saying, my student is still at home, hasn't yet to go to school, where to go. But we need also to tackle on that aspect by saying that, you know, some parents actually do still have the mentality that if my child has chosen this school and did not get the chance to go there, what if I hold my child at home? Then I will see what Rebbe is going to do with the child. I will stay, continue running here and there, complaining, see what is going to happen. I can testify that as I talk, many students go to the schools where they're supposed to go. However, the other challenge is that we still also have in mind that some schools are better than others. And therefore, if I did not get such a school, I will not go until I go for the last option. So I will really take this opportunity to tell parents that we are doing our level best to make sure that all the schools provide equal learning opportunities. That is why even the new formula is saying that the allocation of the student placement should not only be based on their performance, but also their choice, and again, the availability of places across the country. Because we cannot continue having a kind of divide between the schools, saying this is a reference school, this is a district school, this is a 9 or 12 years basic education school. So we should, as a Rwanda Education Board or the Ministry of Education, make sure that we provide equal learning opportunities across the school, because not all Rwandans will fit in the few schools that used to be considered. So that's why even the new formula was saying, give the opportunity even for the minimum or even the low achievers, the exposure, so that they can go in even those renowned or very known schools, so that they can also go there and even challenge the head teacher or even teachers there. Because in the past, some of the schools used to have like top cream of the students. And therefore, it will even be a very easy activity for them to teach them and so forth. While others will get actually the low achievers, and it will be a burden for them. Even some children would say, you know, none of us can help the other, you know.
No, but of that category. If you allow me to come in there, you've done a good job. Yeah. There's no doubt about that in terms of, you know, the reforms. But the concern is there's no stability in the sector. And this is why, you know, you even have resistance. You face resistance from, from parents, because it appears like there's no plan, you know, long-term plan to say if my child is in preschool, I know what the policy is. We haven't had that. And even the wonderful reforms that you're talking about, I'm not sure if we're going to keep them for the next 5 years. At least for now, what we see is you have changes almost every other year.
But they are positive.
So, yes, they are positive, but sustainability. And then the other issue is around quality assurance. So far, we haven't seen any, there's no mechanism for ensuring quality in the education system. I'm sure you've read the World Bank report, which was very clear on the learning outcomes, which are quite low.
Sure.
So with the kind of
Are you talking
wonderful...
about the Human Capital Index?
Yes. You know, with the kind of reforms that you're talking about, where is the missing link, you know, when it comes to learning outcomes?
But can we...
and even with the teachers, you know, the quality of the teachers.
Yeah, I'd also like to give a chance to Chelsea and Ephraim to ask your
Sure.
questions.
I wanted to disagree with Bana a little bit on one thing, and that is around referring to the education reforms that Daktari is talking about as wonderful. There's nothing wonderful about them, in my opinion. And sometimes I make a choice of words that might be
exaggerated.
Yes, that's for purposes of emphasis. I think it's a try and error. For REB to sit down and say that they want all schools to be the same, they are daydreaming. Because not all schools have the same facilities. Not all schools have the same resources. Not all schools have the same access to infrastructure and what have you. So that is one thing. So for them to wake up in the morning and dream that they are going to sit down and have a toss of the coin or roll the dice and say, Ephraim, go to Groupe Scolaire de Bjimana, Bana, go to Lycée de Kigali, Diana, go to that school, and so on and so forth. It is really being extremely theoretical, because not all schools are the same. But I'll take it a notch higher and say, what happened to rewarding excellence? If this child has worked so hard and gotten fantastic grades, why shouldn't he go to the school of his choice? Why shouldn't the top school have the opportunity, because the school administration, the school ownership, and the management and everyone have made a deliberate choice to make their school a school of excellence? Why shouldn't they have the right to pick the creme de la creme?
But
and that's where Bana, just for purposes of emphasis, I do not agree with you on the wonderful, because there's nothing wonderful about not allowing excellent schools to continue excelling. There's nothing wonderful about not allowing bright students to go to the schools that they prefer to go to, or that they qualify to go to.
But Charles,
yes.
and before I say something, Doctor, is this what you meant? I mean, is this what is actually being implemented?
Yeah, in actual fact...
In response to what Charles is saying?
Yeah, in response to what Charles is saying, that we are dreaming. Of course, you have to depart from a dream standpoint, otherwise you cannot achieve high. So dream or the ideal is always important in life. So for the Ministry of Education or for REB, it was important to have such a dream that also has to be achieved, just like he's mentioning, so that actually we know where we want to go and where we are. So what are actually the loopholes, which areas need to be fixed in terms of infrastructure, in terms of other learning facilities. But also I would say that this time we did not only consider student performance or their scores. I said we had to consider also other choices. Yeah. So these other choices or pillars include actually the school and the option that applies for Senior 4, but also the availability of places. For instance, what if like 1,000 students applied to go to Groupe Scolaire Bjimana, which we have already mentioned? Are you going to say because all of them chose that school, everybody should go there? That school doesn't have accommodation capacity.
But the same thing happened, Daktari.
Yes.
I was following in the media about a lady who runs a school in Musanze.
The 80 to 125 students.
Yes, she was overwhelmed because the government of Rwanda has compelled her to take more students than what her educational facility can actually accommodate. So
that also has maybe a kind of background information that the community also need to know.
Yes.
When we launched the primary 6 national examination, we made it very clear that we had an increment of 7% of the candidate coming for P6. And
so there's been a surge in students.
Yes. So meaning that for the academic year 2018, we had 254,000 candidates in P6 with an increment of 7%. So what was the implication is that we would have many candidates in Senior 1. That is the reason why even in different meetings that you had with officials, we sensitized them that even if you said that you are going to host 20, 25, or even 50 students, you would have to accommodate another like
7% more.
Yes. So
Which
was the
takes me
formula.
back to my earlier question around planning education policy. Because if we are focusing over the last decade, the focus has been on enrollment. Enrollment has gone up. But it seems the planning never looked at what happens after enrollment, you know, because now the results are out and suddenly we are saying the number is up by 9%.
That's
and then
7%.
the people who are supposed to receive them are not ready, meaning there are gaps in terms of planning.
I would say that planning does not only remain in the education sector, but it also cuts across other sectors. Because even the children that are coming in our schools, they come from families. So you understand that the entire social cluster actually should be involved in the business. So in the education sector, actually, the moment we saw that increment, we alerted the schools. Only that...
At what point?
When they were going to do their final exams.
Yes, at what point? Because
But let him finish. It might have been too late, but still, the lecture.
Then we said that we shall find actually what you can call unconventional ways to work out so that we can accommodate these students. A number of schools have been ready, making more desks, even expanding rooms or constructing more classrooms if you go around. So because that was the only alternative, and even just like I mentioned, we had the chance also to get more teachers, so we had also even to rework on teacher placement exercise so that we make sure that with this increment, where necessary, we allocate more teachers. So however, I would say that the journey continues, especially to fix some of the few errors that emerged in our data. You might have heard of the case of Stella Matutina in Irurindo, whereby we were actually misled by the statistics that came from the district. But lucky enough, we could fix the issue. So apart from that, I would say that this year, we had even minimum errors in student placement compared to the previous years. Only that this year, I don't know the reason why it came.
A lot of attention was on this.
Sounding.
Yes.
Maybe it is because the issue came on specific schools, some of the cherished schools where actually everybody would like to go.
Doctor, I don't think that's the problem. The problem is around what Bana was saying. It's around the planning and the timing. It's because this year it was extremely prominent because the Gregorian year ended. We finished New Year, celebrated, and after New Year, that's when we got to know what was going to happen in the academic sphere. So it appeared as if everybody else knew that we were going to step into 2019 with the exception of the education sector. And that's really the point. That's really the crux of the matter.
Ephraim, I'd like to hear from you. You had some comments you wanted to make earlier on.
I felt like, again, I think we even had this same conversation last time we were here. Education is not like, let me see, it's not like fast-moving consumer goods sector or the construction sector. It's not a sector that you can say, we made a policy change, it's going to work immediately, and everything is going to be good. It's a learning curve, and it takes time. And I think he just alluded to it, and I think all of us are agreeing and saying the same thing. He said that, the doctor said that, sure enough, this year, they've had less issues in terms of placement than previous times. Yeah. But then you're saying as well that the reason why, and then he asks, he doesn't understand why, and you're saying that it's because of timing as well and around the planning aspect. And I think that comes down to, it feeds into what I wanted to say around this whole thing of it's a gradual gradual process. On the basis that they have made this change, they released the results in the current academic year. Yeah. And that led to the timelines that led to this poor planning. Now they have learned, they're going to continue to change. Now you can't, so coming back to this thing of, we cannot expect a static system that works perfectly as of today. And I think once you start to understand that, I think we will start to see the gains that are actually in the education sector. From the last conversation we had and from what we talked about last time, I genuinely feel there's progress.
Especially with the
maybe if I can add
from
what he has just mentioned. Yeah. We need also to recognize that for the first time also in education, we had to use the online registration of candidates for national examination. You remember we used to use forms whereby you fill, you attach a photo and so forth. These forms will be transferred to REB, then they will be computerized and so forth. So that was also a success, so which even minimized the errors, although some errors, again, were done by school heads and some of the people who helped the candidate in the cyber cafe, where, for instance, where you have to put, for instance, instead of putting the right gender, if you are male, then you put female. Automatically, when it comes time for placement, we send you to a girl school, yet you are a boy. So those kind of
frame in Gashora girls.
So, but we could see that when the placement was out, then you see, this error again, what happened? Then we're tracking that, then we ask the candidate, say, you see, when we were queuing on a cyber cafe, the first one in front was a lady. So the guy in the cyber cafe did not actually delete the gender or select male, so he just filled it. Which combination do you want to go in? So things like
Doctor,
this. But I would say that next time, just like he's mentioning, we would have less errors because we are going to take our time actually to clean up the system and verify our data.
So while we're on that topic, because we're running short of time, unfortunately, we had some technical issues, so we need to still stick to our time allocated. I'd like to ask you our last question before we go to a social media feed, and we have a couple of tweets that we'd like to read. And this is what Barna alluded to, the World Bank economic update that was held and released in Kigali last year in December. And some of the things that they put forward in the educational sector that could be improved included low school completion rates, alarmingly low learning outcomes. So learning outcomes were very low, as well as inadequate teacher skills. But these are some of the things we've just discussed in the last 30 or 40 minutes. But if you can just give us, in terms of your closing bits of information for the show before we go to social media, what are some concrete plans underfoot that the education sector, the ministry, or whether it's around the education board, has to actually improve this sector? If you could give us 2 or 3 concrete plans moving forward.
Thank you. I would start by what maybe you did not mention, and which is really critical in the report, access to pre-primary education.
Yes.
So it was really observed that Rwandans do not really go for pre-primary, and even so far the statistics are showing that we are actually at 20%, and we were actually to be at minimum achieving 45 in the next 2 years. So it is really an assignment for the education sector. Second is about a few years of schooling. We are actually doing 6.6 years of schooling, yet we are supposed to do 14. What does it mean? It means 6.6.
Instead of 14.
Instead of 14.
What does that
That's
mean?
dazzling.
So it means that when you take 6 for primary, 6 for secondary, then you add a minimum of 2 for pre-primary. So a minimum of 2.
14 years.
So it makes actually 14. So, but the reality that we are not doing pre-primary, and again, even if we are starting primary, very few are continuing for secondary. So actually the transition rate which you have mentioned is not really good. And again, the repetition rate is very high to the extent that as a student go ahead, repeating the class, they end up by dropping. So the average of numbers we are doing in a school is not really satisfactory, and you have to make sure that our children go to school. But not only as they go to school, they meet good, well-motivated teachers who can actually follow up on them and let them actually discover their potentials. That is even where we are calling the community to make sure that the children who go to school, they are given maximum learning opportunities. Otherwise, we shall not really achieve the knowledge-based society which we dream to be in the near future.
Then I think another thing that they need to look at is, you see this whole Mihigo thing, the performance contracts that are done, and when you combine it with the decentralization policy of the government of Rwanda, you will realize that when it comes to Mihigo, the districts will score very high marks on the basis of the number of classrooms that have been built. The points that Daktari raised around dropout rates, who moves on from primary to secondary, who doesn't come to school tomorrow, who came to school after they had breakfast. You know, the quality side of things does not matter at all when it comes to
But you know
to the marks. So let me just finish my point of frame. And I think that's where we're getting it wrong. We lose a big chunk in terms of quality because the marking scheme does not consider quality. That's number one. Number two is around our decentralization policy. And I want to talk about where
the
we
marking
have
scheme
failed.
of a performance contract.
Correct.
Okay.
And I want to talk about where we have failed in terms of decentralization. We should have, and it's not too late to change this, to have district education officers or whatever that position is. The good doctor has alluded to it. At the lower tier of the administrative level, education officers who are empowered to actually manage their affairs.
Sure.
He talked about allocation of students to schools and some of the errors that are there. It's because it is centralized in Kigali, and therefore the likelihood of them making mistakes is extremely high. But if it is decentralized, at the lower
if I'm not
units,
mistaken, it is decentralized. In fact, this particular issue is because district officers were sending incorrect information.
No.
Isn't that what happened? Isn't that what was happening?
In actual fact, that is what I quoted, and that's what happened,
Yes.
because data come from schools, and from the schools
Across the country.
Yes.
Yes.
But you see, they only feed.
Yes.
The district.
Yes, they only feed.
Yes.
No, I thought you meant
sector.
the districts.
Yes.
They didn't have a decentralized system of getting information from districts.
Yes,
they
but
do.
they're
It is
only
decentralized.
clerks.
Yes.
They are only clerks.
Someone needs to
Yes,
be held
they need to be
to
empowered
account,
and to be
yeah.
held responsible and accountable for
The
what they
part
do.
of being empowered,
yes.
absolutely.
And this is not unique to the education sector. It applies to even all the other sectors. When you look at, for instance, lands or Ubudehe and what have you, you need to get to a level where that person who is feeding into the central system is held accountable for what they are feeding into the central system.
I just want us to go to a social media feed in the interest of time. But there's a particular statistic, dear doctor, that caught our eye on the square that said that Rwandan teachers earn 30% below the East African average. Very quickly, before we go to our next tweet that's to do with teachers, actually, let's just read it in connection with this particular statistic I just read. This is from Alex Rukundo Mercy, who says that no education system can be better than its quality of teachers. It's good that the number of teachers is being increased, but the question is, are they able to deliver the skills that are needed? Teachers should be equipped first for them to be able to deliver. But
that's a very important quote.
Yes,
that's a very important quote. That is even the reason why we have emphasized actually the vetting of who should enter the teaching profession. That is very much connected even to what we are calling 21st century skills for teachers. So beyond the knowledge of the subject matter which you are supposed to deliver, you need to know languages in which you will communicate that subject matter. So beyond that, you need even ICT, because whatever you teach, whatever you do, ICT has come. It has come to remain. So that's why beyond the subject you will teach, we also include actually exam of English, for instance. We also include the exam of computer. So the knowledge of teachers or the teacher proficiency or the teacher competency is very important, and we are really very much emphasizing that when it comes to teacher recruitment.
But competence aside, and I remember we raised this in our last show about teacher remuneration, or how are teachers, how much do they earn? Is it enough? And I think we didn't get an answer. I'm not going to ask the same question.
But we are doing very much to improve the welfare of teachers.
Yes, the welfare of teachers.
Yes.
30% below the East African average. Can you just give us an idea of some things that are being done to improve the welfare of teachers?
Yeah.
Because like they said, no quality of education is better than the quality of its teachers. Can he please respond just very quickly, brother?
Sure.
Yes.
I was saying that we are doing our level best to make sure that we improve the welfare of our teachers, and maybe the biggest challenge is that when you consider the public servants in Rwanda, 60% of them are teachers. So that is also
60% of public servants in teachers,
are teachers.
Wow.
So you also understand.
That means Mwalimu Sacco must be a very rich corporation.
They need to reduce the interest rates.
That's why so many things had to be worked around, but also in consideration of the means that are available to the country. Yeah.
Very quickly, Brenna.
I just
quickly.
just to say, the pride of the teachers is as good as the journalists. I mean, journalists in this country are paid as almost like teachers, and
I wish I
the
could
outputs
be paid as well
reflect.
as you're paid, but
But I'm glad. I'm glad that he raises very key issues, and which were highlighted by the report.
Yes.
Preschooling, it's a big issue, and it's a big gap in our education system. Sure. How we'll fix that, I think, will be a turning point.
I think is also a key aspect of that.
But I think I really hope that going forward we're trying to find funding for preschooling, because as we speak, it's a privilege for the elite, for the middle class. You know, but we have to take it back to the way we want to see this country move forward. We can't move forward if we just leave preschooling for a few educated families who can afford to pay for it.
Definitely. That is even the reason why we have introduced a special combination under TTC, which is the pre-primary and the lower primary education. So we are now training teachers who will go to teach in the pre-primary and the lower primary education. And we have already communicated to the district that those who have already graduated are actually considered as a hot cake. They should be recruited to come and teach in the pre-primary, because at that level also we want people who are qualified to teach at that level.
Our last tweet is from Rugundana Augustine, and Augustine says that it seems the education sector is experiencing huge challenges that lead to ad hoc changes in policies, which is what you mentioned, Bernard. But it is imperative for education analysts to deeply conceptualize issues in education, being informed by past and present, so as to make proper prediction for the future. I think that's a very interesting point, very valid point.
Stakeholder consultation.
For sure.
We are coming to the end of our show, unfortunately. I would like us to give closing remarks. I'll start with you, Ephraim, Berna, Charles, before we wrap up and have our guests give the closing remarks.
I think the biggest, at least for me, the biggest takeaway from this, considering it's the part 2, is that at least there's continuous improvement or a desire for change. You know, the biggest challenge would have been if our education sector, at the heart of it, were institutions that were static and said we didn't want to change and everything was fine. But you can see that people understand that there needs to be change, and that for me puts me at ease as a citizen.
I think we need stability in terms of policy.
Actually, I was going to say, I'm waiting for the polar opposite to your point.
We need stability. We need stability, and if we are going to have change, it has to be informed by evidence. Consultative process, research. It shouldn't be, someone is appointed and they come up with some new proposal, after paying some consultant. No, we should be patient. And 2, preschooling for everyone. Preschooling will be the turning point. Otherwise, if we remain focusing on primary and secondary, I think we are not doing the right things.
Charles?
As a parent, as a business person, and also as an observer of how things are being done, there's a lot that still needs to be done. I mean, the try and error, the guesswork doesn't do parents and entrepreneurs any justice. But above all, yes, we understand there is patience that needs to be done. In education, even by its definition, you go to school for many years, therefore patience is extremely required. But we want to be your advocate, such that your other people in local government and what have you are with you in this journey, because it seems you're walking it alone.
It's not easy. It's not easy. Dr. Ndayambashi?
Thank you so much. I would say that from the philosophical point of view, when you stand in front of the mirror, then the mirror shows you that you did not make your hairs good. What do you do? Do you break the mirror, or you go back in your room and you make hairs?
Yes.
So for us also, when we get feedback, we don't break the mirror. We take note from the public, from the media. That is why actually we even come here to tell you what we do, the challenge we are experiencing, so that you can also advocate, also help us actually to troubleshoot some of the challenges that we are facing. So we really appreciate such opportunities, and we are ready to continue the journey of transforming Rwanda through better and quality education.
Thank you. Personally, for me, I think the mode of instruction, language as a mode of instruction, is something that still has a major gap, be it Kinyarwanda, be it English, especially with teachers. But I'm very, very, very motivated to know that the teachers that you're equipping with skills, it's not business as usual.
Yeah,
especially
it's not
this
business
year.
as usual.
You're really going up and above to ensure that these
and
are
even
qualified teachers.
French has even
of course,
has to be empowered.
We're part
these
of
days.
OIF, so
Good.
this has to it's back.
Yes,
so anyway,
good.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Ndayambashe.
Yeah.
Berna, Ephraim, Charles, always a pleasure having you guys on the show. We've come to the end of this evening. I would like to thank Uzi Collections, our partners, and Bourbon Coffee for being with us. Thank you very much. Please keep the conversation going on the quality of education in primary and secondary public schools across the country on our Twitter page using the hashtag #TheSquareRW. Have a good evening and see you next week. Good night.